Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people who are making a difference in the lives of others globally, locally, and digitally. We are part of Rotary International, a group of well over 1 million people in 36,000 clubs around the world that believe in service above self, that opportunity to find the joy and meaning that comes from serving others. Our stories that we share as the programs in our online and asynchronous meetings are those that we record with people from different parts of the world doing interesting things. Our format is one that allows such flexibility, and we're excited about that. And today we're going to hear about a very cool story of using popular media as a way to achieve improvement in communities in a variety of ways. And we think this is really exciting. Bill Ryerson is part of Population Media Center and is going to tell us about the work they are doing. Bill, we are so happy to have you. Welcome to the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and I hand the mic over to you.
Ryerson, thank you so much for the invitation, and hello everyone who sees this. Great pleasure to tell you about the Population Media Center's work. I founded it 26 years ago. Gloria Steinem helped us celebrate our 25th anniversary at an event in New York last year. And our focus is on achieving a sustainable planet with equal rights for all. So that puts us into several areas: environmental protection, global population issues, and the rights of women and girls. Biodiversity, of course, is what makes the planet habitable. And the UN Environment Program found in a report 3 years ago that the primary causes of loss of biodiversity are expanding human farming and expanding human habitation. And that leads to loss of rainforest, which also absorb carbon dioxide, and massive slums in places where population is outgrowing the water supply and the food supply. So one of the points that I often make is that the key to achieving a sustainable planet is not endless growth of the population. In fact, no country has gone from developing status to developed status since World War II without first achieving lower birth rates that allows for people to have more money left over at the end of the month, and also leads within a short period of time to increased employment and the creation of a middle class. So family planning is not just a health issue, it is also an economic issue. And we've seen family planning use go through a dramatic change in the last half century, from 10% of the world's couples using modern methods in 1960 to about 57% using modern methods today. The top reasons for non-use have to do with wanting more children, or fear of health effects, or male opposition or religious opposition. So gender inequality and lack of education of women is a key issue. And of course, child marriage is a key driver. So what Population Media Center is doing is addressing cultural and informational issues related to this based on a methodology created by a Mexican telenovela producer in the 1970s, who had dramatic effects on both adult education and family planning use by modeling those in his telenovelas. And he created a third type of character. Of course, all melodrama has positive and negative characters, but he created a middle of the road type of character who represented segments of the audience. And over the course of 100 or 200 episodes, they sort out the positive and negative advice they're getting and figure out who's correct and who's not, and adopt positive behaviors. And because they're just like the audience, but slightly aspirational, they tend to be followed in their behavior by a huge percentage of the audience who see the benefit. And this is based, among other people, on the work of Stanford psychologist Albert Bandura, who spent his career understanding how role models influence behavior and what makes a role model more or less influential, and served on PMC's advisory board until his death 3 years ago. So we've worked now in 57 countries. We have addressed this combination of issues in human health, human rights, and environment. And I'll just give you a few examples of impact. I could go on all day with this, but in Ethiopia, As you can see in this bar graph, there's a baseline bar graph on the left, then post-broadcast of a program among non-listeners in the green center bar, and post-broadcast among listeners in the right-hand bar, showing that increase in ever use and, of course, current use of family planning was double among listeners compared to non-listeners. In Nigeria, we addressed obstetric fistula and its repair, including use of family planning to avoid pregnancy by young girls who get pregnant and are not physically ready to deliver, resulting in loss of tissue from obstructed labor that leads to incontinence, otherwise known as fistula. And in that program, a huge percentage of fistula clients, 54%, at the clinic we modeled in Zaria, named our program as the reason they had come, and 33% of new family planning clients cited the program as the primary factor that brought them to the clinic. Our second program was cited by 67% of family planning clients as the reason they came to the clinic, at a cost of 30 cents per adoption, in a program that was 208 episodes long. So counting all of those costs, primetime air purchase, and all the research costs, came out to 30 cents a person. So it's highly cost effective. And there are more examples. I won't go through all of these, but I will leave the PowerPoint with Rushton so you can look at it. But as you can see here, in the last line, we modeled use of a Marie Stopes call center. This is a reproductive health organization in Nigeria, and very high percentages, over half of the callers cited the program as the reason they had come. In Sierra Leone, with a program of 208 episodes, 50% of new reproductive health clients named the program as the primary factor that brought them to the clinic. And in Mexico, we are now co-producing our second telenovela with Televisa. As you can see here, parents who viewed our first one were almost 75% more likely than non-viewer parents to talk with their children about sex, and adolescent viewers were 80% more likely to use dual protection than non-viewing adolescents. We've done one Hollywood show, East Los High, which became the longest running program in the history of Hulu. And if you are a subscriber, you can watch all of it. It lasted 5 years. It dealt with teen pregnancy among American Hispanics. It's in English, and it was in the top 5 for 5 years, and #1 among Latino viewers the entire time. And these are just other examples, since we do very careful evaluation of impacts in places like Zambia, Nepal, dealing with child marriage, and Nigeria, dealing with child marriage. And as you can see, there's more than I could have time to talk about, but at any rate, those are the countries in which we have worked. And there's the list of them. And that is my contact information. So if you want to be in touch, it's Ryerson at populationmedia.org. And I appreciate your attention.
Wonderful, Bill. Thank you very much. I'll have you stop sharing. We'll introduce the people that we have got on the recording today, and then jump into the Q&A. As we always do, those of you who are part of the recording, you can put in the chat, "I have a question," which lets me know to ask you to unmute and ask it, or you can put the question in the chat and I'll ask it for you either way. So from our club, we have here in the Bay Area, Elton. All right, Elton, wave at the camera. From Eastern Italy, our treasurer, Cecilia. From the Rotary Club of Eugene Metropolitan, longtime friend of the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley, Heather. My name is Rushton. I live in San Jose. And Bill, we are jazzed to talk about this. So we're gonna jump in. I'm gonna let Elton ask the first question. Elton, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, so we see a lot of nonprofit presentations focused on doing great things around the world. But I can't recall, maybe Rushton can, anyone who makes a difference in a family's life at 30 cents. I mean, many interventions require hundreds of dollars per family to have an impact. It just shocks me. Yeah. So what question? So all of the countries that you named, unfortunately, including the US, but let's focus on the developing world, exist in societies where what you are doing is controversial to some segment. They're either religious leaders or village chiefs or male chauvinists or politicians who really don't like some aspect of your program. And you also have a lot of things that you can focus on, all the ones that you mentioned, and then female mutilation and child trafficking and several others. How do you go about selecting the topic, and how do you avoid a backlash from either the political or the religious infrastructure, or do you sometimes have a great backlash?
Okay, well, great questions. Thank you, Elton. The reason it is so cost effective at 30 cents a person or 30 cents of behavior change is because we're using entertainment mass media. You know, a lot of NGOs say, oh, well, let's do a public service announcement. Well, nobody is listening because they're going to get the Coke at that time, and it's not entertaining. And so using entertainment media is much more highly effective than giving people information that's boring. Second, because we're dealing with sensitive topics, we're never telling the audience what to do. We're modeling behaviors and showing realistic consequences in fictional programs. And the audience is buying in by the time we're getting to some of these topics because they're in love with these characters. So when the characters try something non-traditional, like sending the daughter to school as opposed to selling her into marriage at age 13, the audience goes along for the ride because they're in love with the characters. And when the characters show benefits of the new behavior, the audience is motivated to adopt it. If they happen to disagree with the basic message, yes, they may disagree, but they are not complaining to the authorities because this is a fictional program and it's not telling them what to do. If you go on the air and tell people what they should do, they get angry. But if they're in love with a character who gradually, and gradually is very important to not create backlash, evolves into a role model and shows the audience a new way to improve their lives, there is no backlash. And we've never had backlash of any serious nature in any of our programs in 57 countries. So it's the best way to deal with controversial topics. It's also the best way to deal with non-controversial topics. In Sierra Leone, in a very short amount of time, we addressed bed net use for malaria prevention. And the listeners by the end of the program were 5 times as likely as non-listeners to have acquired a bed net during the broadcast. So it's highly effective at conveying information, but particularly sensitive information.
So, Bill, I'd like to follow up on Elton's question. I think this is really interesting stuff. We've had very few programs that are working at the economic scale. I can think of Sanku and the work of Michai Viravidya in Thailand, some others. But there's the difference between avoiding opposition and encouraging partnership. And so, I think of one of the problems we encounter in the United States is for, I think, plenty of people on the conservative side of the spectrum, the sense that they are being targeted, whereas, something like a BedNet program might be a choice that your organization makes about messaging that invites the partnership of a lot of different organizations. Is that part of how you think about the work you do in different places? How can we develop partnerships across the political spectrum in order to achieve the ends we want?
Absolutely. And we work with numerous partner organizations in each and every program. So we're not a service provider. We don't sell bed nets. We work with organizations that are offering various types of services and involve them both in the design of the program and in meeting the demand that we generate for things like bed nets, for contraceptive services, for girls' education, and other things that we're modeling in the program. We also are basing all of the programs on the policies of the host country. So we're not going in there saying, you people in Sudan should do this. We're looking at their policies, and all policies that are in line with UN agreements and human rights accords, we will address. We won't address policies that are out of line with those accords. So we're dealing with a lot of policies that the government has been struggling to achieve, and we're able to move things materially forward, as I demonstrated with some of those examples.
Wonderful. I'm going to pass the mic over to Heather for the next question. Heather.
Thank you. I just put a second question in the chat. I'm bowled over. Thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for being here to let us know that something's working. It's very easy to get overwhelmed in the state of things. So I'm just over the moon to be here and learning this. Are you able to partner with school districts or governments in terms of what they see as priorities, and are they participating in funding any of this?
In some cases, but for the most part, we're supported by international donor agencies. So US and other country governments. We've had 9 different governments support our work through their embassies in various countries. We've had support from multiple UN agencies, individuals, foundations, corporations. We do generally have support of the government, but many of the countries where we're working are not in a position to be making significant financial donations, but they may give us free or reduced airtime or other contributions. And certainly we include representatives and experts from the Ministry of Health and perhaps other ministries who are included as advisors to the writers, because the writers are trained in telling exciting stories. They're not necessarily reproductive health experts or experts on other issues we might address. So they serve as important quality control participants in the design of the program.
Thank you.
Incidentally, we've also had a lot of involvement and support with the Rotarian Action Group on Population and Development, and we've worked with support from Rotary in many countries.
So coming in from our Rotarian in Italy, a question about the programs. Are they in streaming media? How do you think about the different ways of getting these programs to people?
In each country, we look at what are the most commonly consumed media. We're not trying to reach the urban elite. We're trying to reach the rural poor in many countries. And so radio is often the dominant medium, and so we'll do programs on radio. So we've been on Radio Ethiopia since 2002. We've done, I think it's 9 long-running serial dramas since that time. We often pull in half the population of the country listening to those programs. In the US and our work with Hulu, that's a streamer. It's not a broadcast network, but people can access it. And in some cases, we'll do both. So in some places, we'll have content on limited content because of the cost on television and a lot on radio, and then other media as well. So we try to take a whole society strategy in reaching people.
Let's add Heather's question about writers to that. So how are writers chosen and hired within each community?
In each country, we will ask writers to apply. We'll reach out to the National Theater, to the drama department of the National University, to book authors and other writers, and we will train as many as 40 writers in the methodology of modeling behavior through gradual evolution of characters as opposed to telling people what to do. And then we will actually have them go through in the 3rd week of training, drafting of scripts for pilot episodes. And we will make assessments as to both the quality of the writing and the ability of writers to work as a group. Because when you're doing 200 episodes, you can't have one person doing everything. It just doesn't work. So you have to have writers who can, say, take one of the characters and write their dialogue, and other writers doing other parts of it under the leadership of a head writer. And then ultimately, we will end up with 5 or 6 writers for the show, but we will have a lot of people trained in the process.
Bill, when I first heard the story about Population Media Center, I heard about the telenovela that dealt with AIDS in Mexico. And I just found that story so amazing. Can you tell it briefly?
I'm not actually sure we're talking about the same thing, because the early programs of Sabido dealt with family planning, not AIDS. AIDS didn't really become a phenomenon until the 1980s, and Miguel Sabido did his work in the 70s and early 80s. But in his first such program, he created a middle-class couple named Marta and Jesus. And they were, like in any telenovela, struggling to keep their marriage together. But one of the key points of disagreement was how many children they would have. She had grown up in a family of 10 children that lived in poverty as a result of the large family size and fought all the time. And he was sort of happy-go-lucky, slightly macho, but a good guy. And they had 2 children when the show started. And she then became concerned about having baby after baby. And she confronted her husband on this, and he was a little upset. So then she learned about the rhythm method, as we used to call it, periodic abstinence. And they tried it. For the first week, they didn't have to be disciplined, and he thought it was wonderful. By the second week, they had to be disciplined, and he walked out on her. He got really upset. He said, "I thought this was a whim. I thought you would have forgotten about it by now." And she said, "No, we're serious, and you agreed to it." And he said, "Yeah, sure. You can have your discipline," and walked out. The third thing she tried was calling her aunt. If you're writing a telenovela, you've got to have a wise aunt. So the aunt said, "There's something under Mexican law now." This was Mexico legalized family planning about 1974. So this is now in 1976, 77. And the aunt says, "There's something you can do that is legal, but I don't really know the details. You should go see a doctor." She goes to see a doctor who talks her head off. In fact, she drags Jesus along, and he talks about their spiritual life and all kinds of things they don't teach about in medical school. And then he finally refers them to a MexFam clinic. MexFam is the Planned Parenthood of Mexico. Because it was too expensive for most Mexicans to go to a private doctor at the time, Miguel Sabido built that in so people would just take a shortcut and go to the clinic. So they end up in a clinic, they learn about all the methods of family planning, they adopt a method and live happily ever after. And on the steps of the clinic, Marta says to Jesus, "Now you have no excuse not to love me for the rest of your life." And Jesus said, "It was so easy, and now we can go dancing every night and get carried away." So this was the 1970s, and it attracted a huge following and led to a dramatic change in use of family planning in Mexico.
The idea that stories have the power to move people in all sorts of really positive directions is one that we're certainly completely in line with, given the kinds of recordings we do. I'm curious, have you run across other people using the same approach for very different purposes?
Yes. There's an organization in Washington called Search for Common Ground that uses storytelling for addressing conflict and violence. So they learned about our work when I went and met with them years and years ago, before actually starting PMC, because they had just come up with the idea of storytelling on their own. And then they took an interest in the fact that there's a whole methodology for the evolution of characters. But they have addressed conflict situations and trying to build peace in countries where they're working. And we've actually worked in partnership with them in some countries.
Very nice. Let's finish the recording with two more questions. One from Heather, and then I'll add one more after that. So Heather, go ahead.
Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned working only within policies that are already vetted by the UN, but you won't promote policies that aren't in line with them. What would be an example of out-of-line policies?
One, for example, we worked in Sudan. Sudan has a policy that only married couples can access contraceptive methods. This is a violation of UN accords. The UN Population Fund in its 1994 conference with global consent agreed that anyone in need of family planning should be able to access it. So we dealt with what we could. We dealt with married couple deciding to use family planning in a program in Sudan, but we didn't address single people because it was going on government radio and it never would have made it on the air. So, we certainly would not reinforce that policy that says only married couples can have access to family planning. So in any country, you have to look at how can we be helpful to the population without violating human rights.
Thank you.
So, Bill, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this. So you've been at this for many years. What was it in your personal experience that moved you into a space where you're like, telenovelas and radio?
It's a long evolution. I trained as an ecologist at Yale University and thought I'd be teaching at the college level and got interested in sustainability issues and went off to work at the Population Institute in the 1970s, where I learned about Miguel Sabido's work. And I realized just telling people information is boring and doesn't cause change, whereas entertaining people and role modeling is highly effective at bringing about change. So then I actually migrated through 2 Planned Parenthood affiliates, getting to know the reproductive health business, and then got involved in working with a former colleague from the Population Institute who had headed their communications division and had worked a lot of his career with Norman Lear and Mary Tyler Moore, and on some of the social content they incorporated in their programs. And then when he retired, I started Population Media Center in 1998. So it's been a continuous thread now for 53 years.
Well, glad that we've got you to sharing that story with us for sure. I'm going to wind things down and then I'll hand it back to you for the final word in just a minute. First of all of you who have been watching this, thank you for spending your time catching the stories that we share. We meet with people from all over the world doing all sorts of interesting things to improve the lives of others, and we love getting to share those stories. So thank you for being part of that. If you want to learn more specifically about Population Media Center and the work Bill is doing, there are links on our pages. So on our SiliconValleyRotary.com page, you'll find links there. You'll find it on our YouTube channel page. You will find it on our podcast pages as well. There's a lot of ways we like to share these stories, and we hope that you are enjoying them in any particular form that you find them. On those pages, the bio will also give you more info about Bill. So if you'd like to read more about his background, you'll be able to do that there. We certainly hope that if you are on our SiliconValleyRotary.com page, that you will leave some comments. We have a space at the bottom where you can say, hey, these thoughts came to me as I was listening to the program, or the Learn Something New video that Shags posted. I was curious about this and this, or President Mike's intro. Whatever it is that you want to say, feel free to join our space and share your thoughts there. We absolutely welcome that. In an online and asynchronous club, it's one of the ways that we connect with each other. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speakers for the final word. So, Bill, what would you like people to have clearly in mind as they finish up this podcast or video?
Rushton, thank you so much again for the invitation, and thanks everyone for listening. If you have questions that we haven't addressed, I'm happy to answer them. You can reach me at ryerson@populationmedia.org. Also, our website, populationmedia.org, has a lot of information about our work all over the world. We would welcome your support and engagement in the organization. So feel free to be in touch. And again, thank you so much for listening.
Wonderful. Everyone, thank you, and we will see you next week.